What would you say are your goals as the next superintendent of Loudoun County Public Schools?
Well, I would say coming right in, I want to make sure that I am visible in our community, out listening and building relationships with our stakeholders, our business community, our parents in particular, our students, our educators. And I want to come in and I really want to talk with them about what their goals are for our school division and what it is that they hope to see in our classrooms, things that they maybe think are some of our challenges that we need to address. And then we're going to take that information and we're going to build out our plan to move forward. But broadly, my goal is come in and make sure that we have a world-class school division where every child has an incredible experience every day.
And what would you say makes you the most qualified candidate for this position as the next superintendent of Loudoun County Public Schools?
Well, I think one of the reasons that they chose me, and one of the reasons that I'm excited to be there, is that I've got some great experience, 12 years as a superintendent, 9 of them leading a large school division with an awful lot of similarities to Loudoun County. So excited to bring that up there, and excited to help us move forward.
All right. So you talked about listening to, folks listening to what they want in the school system. So we do have the benefit of the results of some surveys GR Recruiting did. We'll go through some of the results of those surveys. And according to the survey by GR Recruiting, the top 5 issues Loudoun County parents, teachers, and community members want you to make a priority. Top is school safety, staff recruitment and retention, teacher quality, academic rigor, and communication, in that order. There are others too, but those ranked as the top 5. Let's just go through the list. How will you improve school safety?
Yeah, well, I think part of the first thing I need to do is get there and assess our school safety program. One of the things that we did down there was commission a blue ribbon panel on safety, where we involved some of our key leaders, both internally and in our community. We included our police department. We included our local security team from the United States Navy. We had our community-wide city partnerships with our mental health providers, for example, and then obviously our internal folks. One of the things that I think we want to do is just work with the great team that we have up there, with the sheriff's office and the good work that they do, with the security team that we already have internally. Think about who else may need to be at the table, and really just assess where do we have any gaps, and where we have them, what do we need to do to address those gaps. We will always make safety a top priority in our schools. We'll take a look at things that have happened in the past, make sure that we have processes and structures in place to ensure they don't happen in the future, and help communicate all that very openly to our parents and our stakeholders so they know how we manage safety and how it is a top priority for us.
So this week I spoke with someone who works in Loudoun County Public Schools, and they told me teachers are leaving in droves. Their words. They were telling me some schools in Loudoun County have lost half their staff. How will you improve staff recruitment, retention, and also improve teacher morale?
Yeah, well, I think across the country we have an issue and a challenge with public education and with teachers. We have fewer teachers than ever entering the profession, which is a major concern for us, as well as teachers who are saying that they want to leave the profession. And there are a lot of pressures on our teachers, just like with other areas of the workforce. I think what teachers tell me, obviously, one of the things that's important to them is compensation. That's always a conversation that we're going to have. But I also think more than compensation, teachers want to be treated as professionals. They want to know that they have voice in solving problems in their buildings. They want to know that they have leadership that cares about them and that is interested in their well-being in their schools. So we're going to come in, we're going to model that. We're going to hold our leadership accountable for that. And we're going to make sure that our teachers know that they have voice, that they are seen, and that they are heard, and that they're a vital part of our organization.
And how will you improve teacher quality?
So that is a function of making sure of 2 things. One, that we have an outstanding recruitment program. So I know we already have a tremendous human resources and talent development team. We're going to make sure that our program focuses on our core values as an organization and our goals as an organization, and that our recruitment efforts seek people who fit with those core values and those goals. And then in terms of how do you continue to improve teacher quality, you build out a great coaching cycle. You have leadership that can support and provide great professional development for our teachers. And we make sure that professional development is world-class.
And how will you improve academic rigor and education outcomes?
Well, so the first thing I want to say is Loudoun County has exceptional outcomes, really one of the high performing school divisions in the state and really in the country. And so that's something that we're going to build on. And one of the ways that we do that is we really think about what great teaching and learning looks like in our classrooms. We make sure that there's common language and understanding for what those expectations are. We make sure that there is access to rigorous learning for all students in all of our schools, and that rigorous learning really meets our standard, our gold standard for what teaching ought to look like.
How will you improve communication? How will you improve communication and relationships with Loudoun County families?
Yeah, I think that comes with being visible, with being open, with just, again, kind of listening, as we talked about, starting with listening, creating opportunities to listen, to ask questions, to really hear those concerns and those questions, and then to develop our responses collaboratively so that we've got shared responsibility. And as we develop those collaborative and shared responses, making sure that we then loop back. Sometimes what happens in large organizations is you don't close the feedback loop. This is what we heard, this is what we did, and go back and share that with people. The other thing that I'm very proud of that we've done down here is really expand authentic parent engagement. So we have created the opportunity, for example, for family voice groups. We have voice groups that go across all of our levels. We have voice groups with, for example, our military families. We have voice groups with our English learner families. Opportunities to sit down in smaller settings and just ask the question, how can we make sure you're having a better experience and that your students are having a better experience with us? And those have been very powerful. They've led to some wonderful changes in our processes and our structures. And we always then go back and talk about how what you did informed our work. I think the more of that we can do, the more comfortable people begin to become with the idea that, hey, we're listening and we're responding, and you're an important part of this conversation. And together we own responsibility for moving our division forward.
And a GR recruiting survey showed 53% of respondents said LCPS's transparency is poor, 26% said fair, 16% said good, 5% said excellent. How will you improve transparency in LCPS?
Yeah, communicate, communicate, communicate. It really does come down to sharing what you know, being willing to talk about that, being willing to answer questions, being willing to be out in front and be visible, and acknowledge mistakes that you're making, talk about how you're going to address those. Also share the good things that we're doing. One of the things that surprises me a little bit about Loudoun County, and something I really want to work on together with our community, is there are so many wonderful things happening. And I think sometimes that gets lost in some of the other conversations. I think it's also, quite frankly, really important that we have great relationships with the folks who can help us tell those stories. So it's important to me that we are able to continue to have these kinds of conversations and build solid relationships with our friends in the media, solid relationships with other key communicators across our community.
One final question on the surveys, and we'll move on to something else. And the GR recruiting survey also showed that 26% of respondents said LCPS's fiscal management is poor. 35% said fair, 32% said good, and 7% said excellent. How will you allocate Loudoun County Public Schools' $1.6 billion budget?
Yeah, so I think when we talk about budget and we talk about how we work with it, first thing that we do is we make sure we have a strategic plan that identifies the board and the community's priorities, and that the budget is focused on that strategic plan. That the budget is really allocated to meeting the goals that are embedded in that plan. But I always talk, when I'm thinking about budget, about effectiveness, efficiency, and alignment. So alignment's that first piece I talked about. And then we want to make sure that we're using that money effectively. So where we're spending it, is it helping us meet our goals? Are we seeing metrics that demonstrate that? And then are we doing that as efficiently as we possibly can? And so that's the general approach I have to it. But I also think it goes back to transparency. If people think we're not using our resources wisely, it's probably because we're not talking enough about how and where we're putting those resources to good use.
Earlier, we talked about academic rigor, education outcomes, Loudoun County English language learners who are economically disadvantaged, and students with special needs have significant gaps in math and reading pass rates in Loudoun County. We're talking about 20-point gaps in both reading and math. Loudoun County School Board talks a lot about equity. They've invested a lot of money in equity programs, but the needle really isn't moving. So how will you address these gaps in learning?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of things I would say about gaps. One thing is, in order to address gaps, you have to know the strengths and needs of the individual student. And the structures and processes that I have here in Virginia Beach that are part of our school improvement work are structures and processes that we'll be bringing to Loudoun County. And it really focuses in on getting to know the individual student, knowing their name, knowing their strengths, knowing their needs, and then building our program around meeting those needs. We also have to make sure we do have appropriate resources to support those students. We need to make sure that we've got appropriate resources in special education. We need to make sure that we have appropriate staffing with our English language students, and that the instruction that is tied to those programs is well designed, specially designed instruction, which again is kind of targeted at the individual student needs.
Now, there were some county supervisors who wanted the school board to hire a new superintendent as soon as possible. Others didn't agree. I believe it was Chair Phyllis Randall who said the current school board is, quote, damaged, and that she didn't think the new superintendent should be selected by this current school board. So how do you plan to address those community concerns? How do you manage this relationship coming in at a time when some feel this school board should have waited to select the new superintendent, perhaps after the elections?
Yeah, well, I think, on the surface, there's a statutory time limit for when a school board has to hire a new superintendent. But all of that aside, I think it's really important that I come in and work to build relationships, right? So people need to get to know me and I need to get to know them. And I'm confident that once we begin to get to know each other, they're going to understand that regardless of how or where things developed in terms of my coming to Loudoun County, that I'm here to do my very best for the students of Loudoun County, for the parents of Loudoun County, and that we're going to do great work together, that we're going to collaborate with our supervisors on their vision for our school division, as well as with our school board on their vision for our school division. And we're going to move forward together and do some great things.
All right. I want to go just a few more questions for you. I don't know if this issue is talked a lot about in Virginia Beach, but it certainly is in Loudoun County. So just have a few questions on bathroom safety. We'll just start with this. Do you think a student should be able to use the bathroom and locker room of their choice despite their birth gender?
So what I think on the issue is it's really important that we understand the federal and state laws on it. And so one of the things I know we're currently waiting on are the state policies. There were some proposed model policies that first we had some model policies. Then there were some new proposed policies. Those are currently under review. And as I understand it from a recent conversation with the state superintendent, that those are in the AG's office for review. And so we'll look forward to getting those model policies. Those will provide us with some direction and some guidance on how to approach the question that you've asked. Right now, we have other federal and statutory case law that guides us. And what we'll do is we'll get up there, we'll work with our school board, we'll work with our legal team, and we'll make sure that we are following that guidance to the letter of the law.
Okay, so if the Youngkin VDOE comes out and says students must use the bathroom and locker room of their birth gender, do you plan to follow that?
My job is always to follow the letter of the law. And so what we'll do is we'll assess that against federal law, because the other thing it said in the model policy, as long as it doesn't violate federal law. So we would want to reconcile those two things, and where we land is what we'll do.
I do know there's some Loudoun County parents that I've heard from who want gender neutral bathrooms at all the schools. Do you support gender neutral bathroom in all the schools?
Yeah, so my answer to that is this: both model policies, both the one that came out under the Northam administration and the one that came out under the Youngkin administration, both called for that as a strategy that can help parents and students feel comfortable. And so if that's the case, that's probably something we would want to pursue.
How do you plan to address vaping and drug use in schools? Because I hear that's a major concern right now.
It is a major concern. I actually sit on the National Superintendent's Advisory Council for the American Heart Association, and it's one of the top topics that we consistently discuss. And I'm pleased with some of the resources that the Heart Association has around education for vaping. It's something that I certainly will make sure that we have in place in Loudoun County when I get there, that there is a good educational program. Certainly should be part of our student code of conduct, but if you're just punishing kids for doing something that they're addicted to and you're not dealing with the front end issues in a proactive way, I think that's, we need to do that. I also, relative to drug use, it's an education issue. It's a community-wide issue. I often say that schools are a microcosm of our community. So if you're finding these issues in our community, you're likely to see them find their ways into our schools. And so we need to work in partnership with our community, particularly with our police departments, with our sheriff's office, and make sure that together our messaging is consistent, our support for families is consistent, and certainly families and students know that there won't be tolerance for that in our schools. But when you say there won't be tolerance for that, that also, again, doesn't address the underlying issues. And so we need to have a strong education program. Students need to know what these challenges are. I just was in communication with the Attorney General's office over the last week or so about a campaign they have called One Pill Can Kill. That is a campaign I will likely want to bring to Loudoun County. They also have some curriculum materials that I want to make sure we are using in Loudoun County. And so, it's important kids know the challenges with fentanyl. It's a horrifying, just absolute horrifying situation that we're finding in our country and in Loudoun County. Certainly down here, we're not immune to it in Virginia Beach. And as an educator, I want to do everything I can to make sure that our young people are safe and that they're not engaging in dangerous behaviors.
And how will you address violence and school discipline issues at school? The school discipline issue, I think, goes back to the teacher retention issue that we see, hearing from some teachers who feel like there are those issues in the classroom and they move on to something else. How do you plan to address violence and school discipline issues?
Yeah, well, I think that's an astute observation. They're absolutely, again, and I want to say, and it isn't to excuse it, but it's not a Loudoun County issue. This is a national issue with student behavior. There are many reasons for it. There's, some folks who would suggest it's pandemic related, but we were seeing this before the pandemic. There are folks who are talking about the impact of social media. There are maybe a lot of reasons for some of the kind of extreme behaviors, and we're seeing some of them in younger kids. I mean, things that we're seeing in kindergarten classrooms that I couldn't have imagined seeing in our schools 10, 15, 20 years ago. And you have to wonder, honestly, what is going on in a 6-year-old's life that those behaviors manifest themselves in our classrooms, right? And so how will we address it, to get to your question? I think the first thing that we want to do is we want to get to the root cause. And we want to make sure that we have processes and structures in place to help us help families as we think about the root cause. So what's going on in that child's life? What supports do they need? What supports do the family need to ensure that we can help them? Because in the long term, we want them to be in our schools and we want them to be successful. We want them to be productive members of our community. Simultaneous to that, we have to make sure we have discipline structures in place to ensure that there's a place for that child to go. There's a place to hold, there's a way and a place to hold that child accountable for their behavior while they're getting the support that they need. We cannot tolerate consistent and ongoing disruption in our classrooms. We have to support our teachers in that regard. I think there are some programs that are emerging with research that work and can be supportive in that environment. And it's important that I, again, have the chance to get to Loudoun, to get my feet on the ground, to get out and listen to our teachers about what's in place, what's not in place, and then work together to develop some solutions that we know will work.
And do you plan to implement the recommendations in the special grand jury report from the last December that detailed how LCPS handled school sex assaults in 2021? Do you plan to implement those recommendations from that report?
So it is at least my understanding that some of that is already being implemented, but I really need to get there and dig deeply into that with my staff to understand what's been done, what's not been done. But if there are recommendations that will strengthen our processes to ensure that we do not have issues in our schools where children are unsafe, and that we can provide assurances to our parents that when you trust us with your children, your child will be safe with us, then we're going to do that. Absolutely.
So when the Loudoun County School Board voted on you to be the next superintendent, we reported on your resume, your education. Want to give you an opportunity to communicate with folks. Who are you? Who is Dr. Aaron Spence as a person?
Well, first of all, I'm a passionate educator who believes in children, who believes that they have the right to thrive in our schools and in our communities, and that it's our job as educators to do everything we can to ensure that that happens, that we do that for each and every child that we're given the opportunity to serve. I think our work is a blessing. I think it's something that I was called to do. I'm also a loving father, and I have 6 wonderful children, 2 of whom I'll be bringing with us to our school system and will be joining us as Loudoun County students. And we're really looking forward to that part of this adventure as well. I just think overall people are going to find me to be approachable. They're going to find me to be a listener, somebody who is deeply interested in working together to solve our challenges, but also deeply interested in helping folks see the school division that Loudoun County is. I truly believe Loudoun County is and should be a nationally recognized school division for the work we're doing. We're going to come in, we're going to think about what innovations ought to be in place to meet the needs of our community. We're going to ask those questions and we're going to soar together.
And in your career as an educator, long career as an educator, are there issues facing the public school system right now, or kids, teachers that you think are emerging right now that are a little bit different than maybe 5-10 years ago? I know we just got through the pandemic, but as this current superintendent of a large school system, does something stand out to you? What are your goals to address it?
Well, we've talked about some of them. Quite frankly, I'm deeply concerned about mental health issues in our schools right now, and because they're in our community, they're impacting our schools. I'm really concerned about our teacher recruitment and retention efforts. I mentioned earlier that the number of folks who are choosing to go into the teaching profession is alarming and should concern us all. We've seen a 35% decline in the number of teacher preparation candidates. In the state of Virginia, the top 4 school divisions in the state of Virginia could hire every candidate coming out of our teacher prep programs in Virginia right now. And so we as a state need to be thinking about why that is and what we can do to improve that, because without new teachers coming into the profession, the face of public education is going to change dramatically. And then I would say lastly, just kind of as an interesting aside about a trend right now that should intrigue us all, this kind of bullet train of artificial intelligence, and how we're going to respond to that, both in our communities and in the workforce, and certainly in our schools, is going to be a really interesting conversation for us to have. So there are a number of big and challenging issues for all of us to wrestle with. At the core of it, though, our work hasn't changed. Our job is to ensure that every single child who walks through our school doors every single day has an incredible experience. And where that's not happening, we have to root out the reasons why, and we have to continue to make ourselves better.
Yeah, you mentioned mental health of students. We've heard at school board meetings in Loudoun County where teachers were talking about students who took their life, and that does seem to be a big issue right now. Is that what you're seeing in Virginia Beach as well?
Yeah, we're seeing mental health issues, and it is certainly amongst our students, but it's also amongst our staff, and it's amongst our families, it's in our communities. And I just think there's so much stress and pressure on folks today. And I think there is divisiveness. And I think, like I said, with access to social media, the things that young people see today are things that perhaps they weren't seeing, 15, 20 years ago. And there's pressures they're under related to that a lot of research is emerging around the challenges with that. You probably saw the Surgeon General put a warning out about social media and young people. So I just think there are real and significant issues. One of the responsibilities, it's interesting to think about education because, a lot of folks think, hey, your job is to just teach kids reading and math and social studies. But the fundamental truth is you can't teach children if they're not in a space to learn. And so we do need to think about, okay, how can we support our families as we address these really critical issues? And do we have the right resources in place? It's not my job to be a mental health provider. It is my job to help families access resources so their child can be well and can come to school ready to learn.
Now, this is our first interview with you. What do you really want teachers, parents, community members, people in Loudoun County to know about you? I understand you're going to start September 1st. Is that correct? What do you want people to know about the leadership style you plan to bring to Loudoun County Public Schools tonight?
Yeah, so I say this. I am, again, an approachable, visible, and collaborative leader. I believe it is everyone's responsibility to educate the children of our community, and we are going to work together and ensure that we have the opportunities to collaborate, the opportunities to talk together, to listen together, and the opportunities to share responsibility for this work. I tell people, like, superintendents can't solve every problem, but what we can do is bring people together to solve problems. So what I really want people to know is that that's going to be the approach we take as we move forward.
Now, you answered a lot of very specific questions this morning. Is there anything else you want to add or any other topic you want to talk about?
No, I'm good. I appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with you, and look forward to continuing with this, Nick. It's been good talking with you.